Je vais laisser la parole à Stéphane sur le ligament anterolateral.
My second lecture is on the anterolateral ligament, and Alexandre asked me to just be maybe a little bit more philosophical than a traditional scientific lecture, and just try and explain what we and I personally have learned so far in the story, which is now been 15 years for us. So this starts for me in 2010. And we saw a lot of patients like this, not this specific guy, and you've seen beautiful videos of Jesus before. This is something completely similar, so a typical non-contact ACL injury in Michael Owen. You see the knee being twisted in a lot of directions. And to start with, it's not completely crazy that with this complex phenomenon, only the ACL is injured. So at that time, we saw that a lot of our ACL reconstructed patients had a re-injury, which was giving us uncomfortable feelings. Secondly, some of our patients who had a proven ACL injury on the MRI didn't have a lot of instability, so no high-grade pivot shift. Some of the reconstructed patients kept on showing a positive pivot shift, which we demonstrated in another study in a gait lab. And so also the second fracture, which has always triggered me personally, was considered as a fracture outside the joint, but being a predictive sign for an ACL injury inside the joint without any clear direct link, in my opinion. So all these things together made us thinking about that we might be missing something in these patients, ruining their ACL and this kind of injuries. Now, if you sit down and think about ACL instability, there's a lot of rotational instability going on in these knees. It's not just Lachman and anterior drawer, what you test in the office. It's when they injure, you see all of them have a rotational aspect. And if you think about rotation in the knee, it's about the two planes, tibia and femur, rotating relatively against each other. The ACL is located in the center of these two rotating planes. And biomechanically, this is not a very functional kind of structure. If you want to affect rotation of these two planes, your structure should be at the outside, at the edge of these rotational planes, just because of the biomechanical principles of the principles of the wheel and axle. It just has a far bigger lever arm to control rotation if it's located at the peripheral aspect of these planes. So the ACL alone is very poorly placed to control rotation. Well, so something at the periphery should be better. Now, I went in the literature at that time, and I also went to the library at the Académie Française to find the publication of Paul Second, because I was so fascinated with this second fracture. And this is actually a drawing of his thesis. So you see the fracture, second fracture, which is pathognomonic for an ACL injury, but he also has this hook pulling and some structure attached to this fracture. And there is a publication later on of Jack Houston, 80 years after that. And he has this publication about, the middle third lateral capsular ligament. It's just one sentence in the publication. It just mentions something. It doesn't describe, no characterization, no nothing, no pictures, no dissection. And then Müller has a publication in 1982, which is actually a theoretical model of where the ligaments in the knee should be ideally placed. And then finally, there was this very basic kind of drawing, which we found in a publication from 2001. So 4 publications we could find about some ligament at the periphery, potentially controlling rotation, but only drawings, no description, no nothing, and nobody actually knew anything about that. Now, Paul Second has been super important to me. He's a fellow Frenchman of you, and you should be, I think, very proud because he has done so many good things, but he was a very clever guy, And he actually wanted to know why so many of the knees with patients twisted their knees had bloody effusions. So he forcefully twisted cadaveric knees in order to find the reason why there was so much blood in the knees after twisting injury. No MRI, no scan, no nothing, no diagnostics, nothing was available. So what he found is that when he twisted these knees experimentally of dead people, at some point there was a bony avulsion when he rotated them, and this has become the second fracture, and attached to this bony fragment, and this has been forgotten in the literature ever since. I don't have to translate for you. Normally I have to translate in English. This is just French, but he found une bande nacrée fibreuse attached to this piece of bone. And when I read this, and this is again the same picture, I thought immediately that this might be the thing which is controlling the rotation in the ACL deficient knee. So we went to the lab trying to find the second ligament. This was the term of our secret project at that time, second ligament. And so this was the first cadaveric knee I ever dissected in search of this potential ligament, and it was immediately extremely clear, this one. So this is I'll just explain you, this is a right knee. We're looking from the side to this knee. This is the biceps tendon, this is the lateral collateral ligament, and this is the anterolateral ligament running from the femur to the tibia. So very clear. And I'm completely sure that if the first knee I dissected just to see and what we could find wasn't so clear, maybe the project would have been, I probably would have been standing here today, but this is how it happened. And then so we started doing a lot of dissections, 40, 50 dissections, and we published this for sure. And this second ligament, which we termed anterolateral ligament then, was found in all but one of the knees we ever dissected in search of. And so this is a typical dissection video. You see, again, LCL, but if you internally rotate the knee, the anterolateral ligament becomes very tight. So it's functioning, as you can see, as a structure in the capsule during internal rotation of the knee. So this is what we published in Journal of Anatomy. And then we wanted to prove the function of this ligament. We did a lot of cadaveric work. It's maybe not so interesting for you, but what we demonstrated is that it indeed, the anterolateral ligament functions as a restraint to internal rotation of the knee as a helper for the ACL. So if the ACL is intact and you cut the ALL, nothing happens. This is below. But if the ACL is injured and then you cut the ACL, the ALL, two bundles of the ACL. If you cut them, they have a pivot shift. But if you cut the ALL together, they have an explosive pivot shift. So a combination of both lesions is needed, ACL plus ALL, in order to have a very high-grade pivot shift. And so again, we also showed that it's affecting rotation. So we thought, okay, cool stuff, let's get this published. And this was very hard. And this was extremely surprising to us, but nobody in the beginning wanted to publish this study. We submitted to GBGS, which are the most well-known papers, orthopedic papers in the world. Nobody wanted to accept it. With some reasons we didn't understand, because it is a cadaver knee or something like that, but really strange. Immediately rejected, not even after review, just by the editors. And so we had all this work and nobody wanted to publish it. And this is the reason why at that time we decided to go online in this video, which was Fumedi at that time. I'm not sure if it still exists. It's not that popular anymore. But this was the beginning of kind of like a YouTube for orthopedic surgeons. And I published this video. I cannot read it, but it's, I think, the end of 2012. And so immediately the video went viral on that forum. And we attracted a lot of attention, which eventually led to the publication in Journal of Anatomy, not an orthopedic publication, but just a plain anatomy publication. And this publication is now the most cited publication ever for Journal of Anatomy. So, because all others didn't want to accept it. And so then I did my thesis about it and so on, and the press picked that up globally. It was a hype at the BBC and CNN and everything. And we were surprised because in the beginning nobody wanted to listen, and then everybody, and then there was this backlash which was very violent. So we had this kind of discussions, does not exist, fact or fiction. Even the New York Times said it was an invention by us and it was not a real ligament. So very, very crazy period. And I was, of course, completely alone as a student, PhD student, no big guy at the time. So I was about to give it all up, you know, this is not what it's worth to do science. I want to do science. I don't want to be politically involved in these things. Until I met this guy, and you'll probably all know him, that's Bertrand Sonnery-Cotet. I met him in Amsterdam on a meeting, and we started talking. We became immediately friends, and he's very clever. So this is actually the reason why we could propagate the ALL, because we made this publication together in 2015, so now 10 years ago already. This is the first clinical series of ALL reconstruction, and from then on, it's completely exploded. This is the milestone publication. So we just showed that whenever you add ALL reconstruction to your ACL, you have less recurrence. So it protects your ACL. And so that's, of course, extremely important if you want to have less recurrence after ACL injury, which is the most important complication, in my opinion. You have to do ALL reconstruction. So we founded Santi Group. We did a consensus paper in 2017. You see more and more people supporting the concept. And this first consensus meeting was about the concept. Does it exist or not? And then everybody said it exists. And so now just recently, in December, we had a big meeting in the US with all the world leaders on ACL surgery, the surgeons. And so it was on indication. This is published now just in September as well. And this is extremely important because with everything I told you before, all the problems and non-believers and things like that we had to fight, eventually now is published by global consensus that in every patient under 25 years old, every patient with the ACL injury, you should do ALL reconstruction. This is extremely important. And this is anonymously, and it's strongly recommended. So that means if you don't do it, you have to have very good reasons not to do it. And this is globally. And then secondly, if you have a high-grade pivot shift, you should do it. And for sure, in revision setting, adding ALL reconstruction is also strongly recommended. So there is a lot of statements, as you can see here. Please read them if you're interested. But remember that you should do ALL reconstruction in the high-risk ACL population. If you don't do it, you have to explain why. Actually, you're probably making a mistake. This is the statement. So you probably know all of this as well, especially the older colleagues for sure know Lemaire procedure, especially in France. It's so well known. In the rest of the world, it's not so well known as in your country because you guys invented it. Sort of like, this is a bizarre maybe procedure at that time because they did something at the lateral side of the knee, but there wasn't a ligament. You know, they had an ACL injury in the knee and they treated the outside of the knee. They didn't treat the ACL at that time. No arthroscopy, didn't exist. They didn't cut it, no surgery. So patient has ACL injury, treatment is something at the lateral side of the knee. This is Lemaire, this is a variant, and they claim it was the first, but of course Lemaire was first. This is a variant, you all know Macintosh procedure, there's Loci, Krakow, all lateral extraarticular procedures to treat ACL injury. You all know that these became completely out of fashion, but the reason is they performed these operations as a standalone procedure. So no additional ACL. ACL is injured, they treat actually the ALL and not the ACL together. And that's the reason why they failed. So there is a lot of publications that these operations are bad. They're not bad. You just have to combine them with ACL surgery. And this is what they forgot or didn't do at the time because they didn't have the technical equipment and know-how to do it. So you shouldn't consider these as extra-articular ACL reconstructions. There's just non-anatomic ALL reconstructions. So please look at them in that perspective. Then there is 4 RCTs now about ALL reconstruction. it's not important, I think, for you to know what the exact surgical technique is. We don't know yet. There's plenty of, and we've published as well that there is no big difference, no difference actually, between a technique using a strip of the ITB or what I prefer uses a part of the gracilis tendon. There is 4 RCT trials now which show that whatever you use as a technique, if you do the ALL reconstruction, it halves ACL graft re-rupture rates. So before we had like 7, 8, some series says 10% graft rupture, but if you add the ALL reconstruction to that, you have 50% less graft ruptures for ACL. So I think it's extremely important to do. And so from the beginning, 2013, my first publication on ALL anatomy, sorry, this goes automatically. It's not what I meant. So now we have more than 600 publications on ALL, which is, I think, quite a lot for a non-existing ligament. Okay. And so how I see ALL now, what we have learned is everything is about the pivot shift. This is the problem in an ACL injury. This is what causes your patient to be unstable. It's a combination of a shift, so anteroposterior shift, and a rotation, which is the pivot. And how you can see it and how we see it now is that the ACL injury mostly affects the shift, and the ALL and also the posteromedial injury, so this what we call the ramp lesion nowadays, control the rotational aspect. And so if you want to have this high-grade pivot shift, at least ACL and ALL, maybe ramp lesion, will be there too. So you all know the so-called unhappy triad of O'Donoghue, maybe, medial collateral ligament, meniscus, ACL. I think this is actually the contemporary unhappy triad. Most of these patients have a combination of this. So every soccer player should be suspected for a combination of these 3 before you go to surgery. Always think about this combination, and most of the time you have to treat it accordingly. So to me, this is the story. This is not the beginning of something. It's not the end of something. It's just the beginning of something, and this is what we call the era of the secondary restraint. So we have been looking to the ACL, and what we introduced in hindsight is that you have to consider other structures which are helping the ACL to stabilize the knee. These are the secondary restraints. ALL for most, but also ramp, and there will be coming more. And if we don't treat them, we have a higher chance of a relapse. So what have I personally learned over these more than a decade? I always think about Schopenhauer. So in the beginning, if you try to introduce something new, people want to make you ridiculous, you know? It's not true, they're affected, they're aggressive. And then secondly, they get to oppose you, and in the end, everybody has always known it. So that is also what we experienced. In the end, everybody says, yeah, it's completely logical, we knew that for a long time. But this is what's happening to the ALL the same. Second thing I learned is if you want to go fast, go alone, but the thing is you want to go far, and then you need a team. So go together. So we did a lot of things together, and as I showed you, only the teaming together with Bertrand made the story go further and further. And so I had the honor to meet a lot of friends, and also French friends for sure, along the way, which helped me and progress this very important concept in knee surgery. So just to conclude, I always comfort myself with the words of Victor Hugo, who says that aucune armée ne peut résister à la force d'une idée dont l'heure est venue. Voilà, c'est ça. Merci.